Hello and welcome back to another Parry This history video. Today we are continuing our historical analysis series about Kingdom Come Deliverance II with a biography of Havel Medek of Valdek, a member of the League of Lords and documented enemy of Sir Divish of Talmberg, a friend of our main character Henry of Skalitz. This video is based on real life history, as is KCD2, so keep in mind anything I say in this video is a potential spoiler for the game. So if you haven't played it yet, watch with caution, as this will be your only spoiler warning. So now that we've cleared that up, let's dive on in and get to know Havel Medek of Valdek, at least as well as we can. Havel Medek of Valdek, Czech Havel Medek z Valdeka, emerged as a notable, if somewhat controversial figure in the tumultuous political landscape of late 14th and early 15th century Bohemia. A scion of the Valdek branch of the larger Buzic noble family, Havel's life and actions illustrate the era's intense factional conflicts, weakened royal authority, and shifting allegiances that culminated in a significant reordering of power in the Kingdom of Bohemia. Havel's lineage can be traced to the Buzic or Buzici noble clan, an old and storied family whose roots reached back to at least the early medieval period of Bohemia. The Buzic family name, applied retroactively by 19th century historians, stems from a legendary ancestor known as Buzz, mentioned in the 12th century Chronicle of Cosmos. Over generations, branches of the Buzic family rose to prominence and acquired various estates, titles, and responsibilities at the Bohemian court. Among these branches were the Lords of Valdek, Havel's immediate forebears, whose fortunes were closely tied to the castle and domain of Valdek and the broader central Bohemian region. The Lords of Valdek likely descended from Uldrich Zajic from around 1271, the founder of the Valdek lineage, who secured a position of influence through royal appointments and the construction of Talmberk Castle in the mid-13th century. Over time, the Valdek family held estates including Tinnik nad Sazavau, a fortified settlement located on both banks of the Sazava River in the Benisov district. This area's strategic location allowed its noble lords to oversee local trade routes and exercise influence in the shifting political spheres of central Bohemia. By the late 14th century, Tinnik nad Sazavau was firmly in the hands of Uldrich Medek of Valdek, Havel's father and lord of that estate. Havel Medek of Valdek was thus born into a noble environment that balanced centuries-old tradition with the evolving realities of a Bohemia increasingly unsettled by internal strife. The exact date of his birth is unrecorded, but he was likely active as a young adult by the mid to late 14th century. The first definite mention of him in surviving documents places him in Tinnik nad Sazavau in 1349, indicating that by this time he was recognized as an adult member of the Valdek lineage, probably participating in the family's management of estates and local affairs. Havel Medek's lifetime overlapped with the turbulent reign of King Wenceslaus IV, a period marred by severe internal conflicts. Wenceslaus, a member of the Luxembourg dynasty, struggled to maintain effective royal authority. His frequent absences, perceived inefficiencies, and tensions with the nobility gave rise to multiple noble factions seeking to assert control or at least to curb the excesses of royal prerogatives. During the late 14th and early 15th centuries, the Bohemian nobility grew more fractious. Wealthy lords and knights banded together in alliances that would come to shape the future of the kingdom. Foremost amongst them was the League of Lords, an influential coalition of high-ranking nobles who challenged Wenceslaus IV's governance and aimed to secure a stronger voice in state affairs. Formed in a series of shifting alliances between roughly 1394 and 1405, the League of Lords attracted aristocrats disenchanted with the king's leadership and eager to influence matters of succession, especially as the Luxembourg dynasty presented multiple claimants, most notably Wenceslaus's half-brother Sigismund of Luxembourg. Havel Medek's most documented act, the Seizure of Talmberk Castle in 1390, provides keen insight into his character and the broader issues of noble autonomy and defiance of royal authority. Talmberk Castle, situated in central Bohemia, was then held by Divish of Talmberg, a regional lord of some standing. Without any clear royal mandate or legal right, Havel besieged and captured Talmberk Castle, detaining Divish as a prisoner. This dramatic action was more than a simple territorial dispute. It reflected the weakening grasp of the central government and the growing audacity of individual nobles to settle conflicts by force rather than through royal or provincial courts. After his conquest, Havel began styling himself as Medek of Talmberg, a symbolic appropriation of status and title designed to legitimize his possession. For 7 years, Divish languished in captivity as Havel ruled the castle and its environs. During this time, the Bohemian provincial courts, though slow and often compromised by noble interference, ultimately denounced Havel's seizure as illegal. By around 1397, faced with mounting legal pressure and the disapproval of more powerful aristocrats, Havel was compelled to release Divish and return Talmberk Castle. This reversal not only stripped Havel of his ill-gotten foothold, but also underscored that even in an era of weakened kingship, the nobility remained subject to certain constraints, chiefly those imposed by their peers through the evolving, if still imperfect, mechanisms of noble justice. While the extant records are sparse on the day-to-day intricacies of Havel Medek's political maneuvers, it is clear he operated within the orbit of the great noble factions that opposed King Wenceslaus IV. Havel's brazen acts, such as the unauthorized seizure of Talmberg, fit into a broader pattern of noble resistance and disregard for central authority. This environment was precisely what led many aristocrats to join or support the League of Lords, a powerful faction that aimed to restrict the king's influence and ultimately to shape the question of royal succession. It is within this charged atmosphere that Havel Medek's political sympathies can be discerned. He appears to have backed Sigismund of Luxembourg's claim to the Bohemian throne, positioning himself against Wenceslaus IV. Sigismund, who would later become King of Bohemia, crowned in 1419, and eventually Holy Roman Emperor, represented a potential alternative to Wenceslaus's troubled rule. By lending his support to Sigismund and aligning with other nobles who championed the cause, Havel placed himself in a complex and dangerous political environment. The choice to oppose a sitting king, even one as politically vulnerable as Wenceslaus, risked royal reprisal, as well as the instability that often accompanied shifting aristocratic alliances. Membership in, or at least sympathy toward, the League of Lords would have offered Havel both security and a measure of collective bargaining power. The League, composed of some of the most influential noble houses in Bohemia, formed an opposition bloc capable of confronting royal power head-on. The exact nature of Havel's involvement, whether he was a core member or a peripheral supporter, is not thoroughly documented, but his known defiance of royal authority and association with key noble agendas strongly suggest active participation in this broad noble opposition. Noble identity in medieval Bohemia was closely intertwined with heraldic tradition. While direct evidence of Havel Medek's personal coat of arms is scant, the Valdek family's heraldic traditions likely influenced his insignia. The Buzic lineage is associated through legend with a boar's head, a symbol tied to a legendary ancestor who supposedly defeated a wild boar bare-handed. Over time, various branches of the family incorporated animals and symbols into their coats of arms, reflecting their lineage, valor, and martial prowess. By the late 14th century, the Valdek branch's heraldry may have featured a boar's head as a nod to ancestral feats and to the established Buzic emblem. Contemporary sources suggest that a coat of arms featuring a silver boar on a black field may have represented the Valdek's line identity. Whether Havel himself adopted such heraldry or adapted it, particularly after his brief period of styling himself Medek of Talmberg, is uncertain. Nonetheless, the symbolism, a resilient, tenacious animal, would have aptly represented a nobleman involved in sieges, territorial disputes, and political intrigue. Havel Medek of Valdek's life unfolded against a backdrop of increasing tensions that would eventually erupt into the Hussite Wars shortly after his death. Although there are no detailed records of his final years, it is known that he died in 1410. His passing came before before the open religious and political conflicts that defined the 1410s and 1420s in Bohemia. Yet he lived long enough to witness the crucial early stages of noble opposition to Wenceslaus IV and the jockeying for succession in the Luxembourg line. In the decades following Havel's death, both the Valdek family's prominence and Valdek Castle itself declined. Political upheavals, changes in land ownership, and the catastrophic wars that followed eroded the family's holdings and influence. Valdek Castle would eventually fall into disrepair and be described as desolate by 1623. Today it remains as a ruin, a silent testament to the once active noble house and its members, including Havel Medek, who strove for power within its walls. Havel Medek of Valdek's life, though imperfectly documented, is emblematic of the transitional period medieval Bohemia, a time when noble families tested the boundaries of royal authority and realigned themselves according to shifting political fortunes. His story, spanning from local estate management in Tinnik nad Sezivau to violent seizure of neighboring castles, captures the essence of a noble class in flux, forging new modes of influence as traditional centralized power waned. Through his actions and allegiances, Havel contributed to the broader currents that shaped Bohemian history on the cusp of the Hussite era.